If you would like to earn CPE credit for listening to the show, visit earmarkcpe.com/FPA. Download the app, take a short quiz, and get your CPE certificate. Finally, if you enjoy listening to FP&A Today, please go to your podcast platform of choice, click the subscribe button, and leave a rating and review of the show. And now, on to the show.
From data rails, this is FP&A Today.
Welcome to FP&A Today. I'm your host, Glenn Hopper. Today, our guest is Lindsey Martens. Lindsey is a dynamic finance leader who thrives on turning complex financial data into actionable insights. With nearly 2 decades of experience across accounting and FP&A, she brings a wealth of expertise in financial modeling, strategic planning, and process improvement. Lindsey has a super interesting background that includes leading a remote team of analysts and managing forecasts and budgets at Valera. She is a change agent focused on automation and innovation in the FP&A space. Lindsey's another convert, transitioning from accounting to FP&A. We'll talk to her about this transition, as well as building trusted partnerships and driving business decisions with data. Get ready to explore her favorite projects, biggest challenges, and vision for the future of FP&A. Lindsey, it's an honor to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, Lindsey, we've been on kind of a run lately with people who made the transition from accounting to finance to FP&A, and it's always interesting to me. And I think that accounting skills would serve you well in FP&A, but it's interesting that more people are making that move. And I'm wondering, even prior to that transition, if you could take me through your career and how you got into FP&A.
Yeah, so my career's just been like a series of small pivots that got me to FP&A. I started out back in college, thought I was going to be a coder. I got a computer science degree, quickly realized that wasn't for me, but what I had really loved was all of the accounting classes I had taken in college. So, right out the gate, I went and got a accounting job at a Fortune 500 company and quickly realized that at a company that size in accounting, you really end up doing a lot of the same thing day after day. And so I knew in order to grow my career, I wanted to be at a smaller company. So the next role, I went and got more of a generalist position. And, the wonderful thing about doing accounting at a small company is that you get to do it all. And that includes all the finance, all the accounting, just dabble in everything. And, even at the time, I was naive enough not to really understand that there was 2 tracks I could go into. And so I spent all this time in accounting, then eventually as a controller. And what I had really loved about my job was the forecasting and the budgeting, all of the ad hoc analysis, all these things that were truly finance. And so that's when I made the pivot, and it's been 10 years since in finance.
So it's interesting that you came from a computer science background, because I think even though you didn't go down that as a career path, that sort of intellectual curiosity that led you to coding, it feels like it scratches that same itch that the forecasting does, and sort of the working with numbers and to get to it. Do you find now that you still, even though you're not a coder, that things, whether it's logic or approach to things that you learned in coding, do they still apply in FP&A today?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first things you learn when you're doing coding is an if statement, which you write in Excel.
Yeah, I still love my ifs in Excel. So
yes, absolutely.
So through your career in FP&A, you ended up at Valera, and you've been there, about 7 years now. Tell us a little bit about Valera. What's the company and what industry is that?
Yeah, so Valera is actually a relatively new company. I have spent, the last 6+ years at Opps Solutions, which merged on January 1st, 2024 with another company. And Valera is the new name of the merged company. So Valera is a credit union service organization. And basically what that means is that the company's clients are credit unions. And we exist in the fintech space. So most of our products relate to payments. So any sort of, tool or program that's running through a credit union that touches payments, we provide some sort of solution for.
Well, tell me about some of the projects you've worked on and some of your achievements at Valera. I think, one that when we were talking before the show, that really it's kind of a statement on where the world has been sort of post-pandemic and now into 2024, but leading a remote team of financial analysts in doing the forecasting and budgeting all remotely. So tell us about, the remote team and then just some of the other cool projects you've worked on. while at Valera now and previously at Co-op Solutions?
Yeah. So, COVID hit in 2020 and they said, everybody go home. And so our team has been remote ever since then. I think it was a very natural change for our team. Financial analysts are thinkers by nature. And so to have quiet space to do that was very, very easy for them. And so many companies are all over the place anyways. It's not like we were all in one office together to start with. So really small team, small but powerful team that I work with at Valera. It's just a great group of people, but it does kind of change the way that you work. You have to be a little bit more intentional about the things that you do and the buildup of the team for sure.
So I think back early in my career when I was starting out as a financial analyst, and I was in telecom, and we were merging with a different company every couple of months, it seemed like. And I went from having my own quiet office where I could think and really go heads down and work on these models to being in this massive cube farm where the cubes they all had low walls too. So there was no privacy. You could see just across, like it was like prairie dogs, just a sea of people across. And that was very hard to do the kind of work because you'd go head down into your model and then there's people walking by and then people, and all the cubes were like in these little pods of 4. So at any time, any of the 3 people that were in the pod could be talking to someone. It was actually really hard to do like that deep work of building out a big model. And I would have given anything to be working remote then. Now, later in my career, as I'm managing teams, it seems like the team's fine with being remote, but I feel like I'm at a disadvantage because I can't just walk up to somebody's desk and interrupt them while they're making their model or whatever. But do you find, are there challenges to managing remotely? Like training or kind of one-on-one mentoring and coaching? How do you handle that from a remote setting?
Yeah. So again, you just have to be very intentional about it. So one-on-ones became very important. I'll tell you that, one of the things that used to drive me crazy is you'd start a meeting with a group of people and they would spend 5-10 minutes chit-chatting in the office. And it's like, oh my gosh, you guys, we can do this after the meeting, right? Like, I just want to get this meeting done with and move on. And now the script has flipped. In order to build trust and really get to know people, you have to build that time in. So do the the water cooler talk at the beginning of a meeting, get to know people, spend time during your one-on-ones, asking about their family and their weekends and those sorts of things. And then when it comes to training, again, like people maybe aren't just going to hear things. They're not sitting next to you. So, one of the things that my team loves and that I was kind of surprised by is we'd have these kind of like smaller group meetings, not every week. Nobody needs another weekly meeting, but maybe once a month. And one of the topics is always share a tip or a trick that you have learned recently. Like bring up Excel and show me the new formula you're using. And then on the flip side, we do tell me a pain point. Tell me what you're dealing with lately that's just driving you crazy. And let's all together try to solve that. And the things that we learn from each other are the things that we'd probably be picking up if we were in the office together. But you just have to make purpose, make time for that.
Yeah, it's funny when you mentioned the small talk at the beginning of meetings. I didn't really think about that until we started using those AI note takers in meetings. And so I'll go through, I have this like elaborate note keeping system that I have from all my meetings where I take my transcript and I, get the action items and I run it through a GPT and kind of get the key takeaways and I save all the notes from the meetings. But every one of my meetings, it could be a 30-minute meeting and the first 10, like yesterday I was trying to find an answer in one of these transcripts and I realized we've spent 10 minutes talking about Chris Christopherson, then the movie Convoy, then Smokey and the Bandit, and we were so far off the rails of anything. And I need to train the note takers to, you know what, you don't need to record this part. This is, but it was pretty funny going through and seeing that recorded in the historical ledger, I guess. Yeah. But anyway, as much as I'd like to now that I've mentioned it, I want to keep talking about Chris Christopherson in 70s trucker movies. But instead, let's get back to FP&A. Hopefully everybody's getting near the end of budget season where the budget numbers are like V12.2 .2.a/final, or what, and we're hoping that we're not having to create any more budgets, but it is top of mind for all of us right now. Walk me through your kind of approach to budgeting and forecasts. And have you historically been more of a top down or bottom up building the budgets? And what's your approach in working with departments and doing the forecast and run rates and all that?
Yeah. So, we use rolling forecasts. It makes sense for our business. So we're updating those models every single month. And what I found is there has to be sort of a balance there. There isn't a need to publish a budget or publish a forecast every single month, but how much of the work do you do on a regular basis so that when it comes time to budget or forecast, you're not needing to work 68 hours to get everything updated, right? So there's kind of a balance there that we've learned, even if you're not going to publish it, still get things updated, reach out to your business partners, kind of check in on how things are going. And then during budget season, we've already got this really solid foundational forecast that we're using that we've been updating all year. And then it becomes this very intensive, having lots of meetings with business partners, getting everyone on board with the numbers, setting goals with the sales team, and also working with that exec team for their top number that they're trying to hit. It's definitely a mesh, I would say, of the two.
Yeah. As I've been talking to people right now, it's funny because usually Q4, we're scheduling events and trying to do webinars and everything, but our lowest attendance in all this, and even the podcast listening numbers, people are so deep in budget season, the last thing they want to do is hear somebody else talking about budgeting. However, we have found, as we've talked to different listeners and folks out there, that they do like hearing about sort of triumphs and things that our guests have overcome, because then when they're in the heat of budget, it feels like kindred spirits. So I'm wondering if you have any challenging budget experience stories or things that you've faced in your career during budget season that you've had to overcome, things that were particularly difficult. Anything that jumps out at you on that front?
Yeah. It's only happened one time in the midst of budget where I've thought to myself, yeah, I cannot do this. I'm done. Right. Only once has that happened. And of course it was 2020. And, at the time, everyone's budgets were blown out of the water.
Yeah. How do you forecast in a black swan event? Yeah.
Yeah. It just, the world was upside down. And then we're trying to come up with 2021 numbers. That just seemed so far away. But then add on top of it, we were trying to roll out a new consolidation tool. And so just add one more thing on the top. And what I learned is this is a bad idea. That is a bad time to be rolling out a new forecasting tool, is right in the middle of budget season, in the middle of a pandemic. This is not something that you just kind of do off to the side, right? So really tough, nothing tying out, spending all my time trying to get everything to match rather than focusing my efforts on, building, an answer that everyone feels good about. So never again. I learned my lesson.
Yeah. FP&A Today is brought to you by DataRails, the world's #1 FP&A solution. DataRails is the artificial intelligence-powered financial planning and analysis platform built for Excel users. That's right, you can stay in Excel. But instead of facing hell for every budget, month-end close, or forecast, you can enjoy a paradise of data consolidation, advanced visualization, reporting, and AI capabilities. Plus, game-changing insights giving you instant answers and your story created in seconds. Find out why more than 1,000 finance teams use DataRails to uncover their company's real story. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Learn more at datarails.com. We were in that talking about working with the different groups, and we kind of got into business partnering a little bit. And I love this term, and it really, when I started out in FP&A, we didn't call it this, but the whole idea of, finance coming out of the sort of the ivory tower of we're just the numbers people, we don't get involved in the other. But FP&A has really changed in recent years to lean more into business partnering, where we're showing value from stepping out of our seats in accounting and finance and going and working with sales and marketing, with operations and HR and all the other groups to help them with their reporting and help them have better visibility into their side. Have you done a lot of business partnering, and what's kind of been your approach to it?
Yeah. So business partnering is actually my favorite thing about FP&A. I love being the translator. I kind of think of myself as, I'm taking all this data, accounting data, and then all these other sources that come into it, and I'm packaging it up in a way that is very digestible by the rest of the organization, especially the leaders who are making decisions. And business partnering is such an important piece of that. I have to have trust and relationships with people across the organization so that there's like this mutual benefit, right? I learn from them about the business, and then I can take that and tie it back to the financials and share my findings. And I actually think this is just going to continue. Finance is just going to keep becoming more ingrained in the daily business, if you will, and really becoming a part of all these little organizations within the organization, if you will.
I see that too. And I think, you know, as and not to get into the whole AI piece, but we've talked, especially in recent years, about how automation, and we'll just not just AI, but automation in general, is going to take jobs away from us. But I think that it's really an opportunity. So maybe some data entry, some sort of frontline entry level jobs, maybe they will go away, or whoever's being hired in that position is going to have to, instead of being hired as a data entry person, they're going to have to add that level of value above it. But I think we're FP&A people, we love building models. And I think it's not there now, but even tools like Copilot and Microsoft, I mean, at some point, all of our favorite formulas and things that we do in Excel and things that make us stand out, people are going to be able to do just by typing natural language. And instead of, typing out a function, they're going to just type, hey, I need to do this. And Copilot's going to do it in Excel, which a lot of us, it's going to be like people who throw away their mouse because they only want to use keyboard shortcuts and all that. I think a lot of us are still going to build Excel tools the old fashioned way. But I also think that because it's sort of going to be a democratization of this ability, that partnering is going to get stronger because it's going to free us up from all the data entry time to spending more time working with those teams. And I think if the data collection and data cleaning and the model building, if we're spending less time doing that, I could see even more partnering in the future. Does that kind of go along with what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where finance adds value, right? We're not adding value by doing calculations in Excel.
Right.
I think about how
even though that's the fun part. That's
right, right.
So on one hand, there are fewer people coming into accounting, and I haven't seen numbers as extreme in FP&A, but it's sort of, the whole accounting and finance industry. But what do you think are some of the challenges for FP&A in general, and maybe the opportunities and kind of where you see the field going in the next few years?
Yeah, the thing about FP&A is that it can be kind of abstract, whereas accounting is like a science, FP&A is more of an art form. It's not just X plus Y equals Z. You have to add the insight on top of it. And where do you get that insight from? I mean, the options are, endless. There's so many places where you can pull assumptions from. And so I think that's just like in general, the biggest challenge in FP&A, just ongoing. As far as opportunities, there's so many new tools coming out. And I think for me, it's really exciting. I always like to learn a new tool, but I do think, just like the rest of the world, we're going to see just a lot of evolution in the future.
Yeah. It is amazing how many, whether with AI or not, just sort of the ability to quickly aggregate data and use it and put it in with our GL data and build, better track KPIs and modeling and forecasting, especially at larger companies. I mean, you may start out in Excel, but or end up, putting your presentation together in Excel, but just being able to have access to this data much easier than you used to from all these different systems. It's pretty cool to see the evolution happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking back on your career, what would you say is is the best achievement of yours? Like a forecast or analysis or system implementation, something you've done that would be like something you would give as an example in a job interview. It could be analysis or strategic piece of advice that drove action. An example of one of the companies or a place where you've done this. We'd love to hear. We like hearing about challenges, but we also like hearing about successes here as well.
Yeah. One of my favorite examples, which is so simple, but that's the beauty in FP&A is that it doesn't always have to be complicated. I had this situation once where a particular line of business, all of a sudden the profits just kind of like increased over a few months. And so we had, leadership just so excited, like, yay, look at these great profits. We're doing so wonderful. How exciting. And then on the flip side, I'm hearing from my operational partners, they're screaming, they're crying, like things are awful. The world is on fire. And I was like, wow, what is going on here that there is such a disconnect between the two? And this is where FP&A comes in, right? So what we did, super simple answer here, is every time we showed the financials or a P&L for this particular line of business on the same page, right next to it, we would show the service levels. And you'd see profits go up, service levels go down, and all of a sudden, like it clicked. Anybody who looked at it went, oh, I understand now. I can see what's happening. We've got short-term wins that are going to turn into some very long-term problems, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So that's my favorite. It's such an easy one, but I like all things, they don't always have to be complicated.
So big phrases that are being thrown around now, and I love it because it's what makes FP&A so exciting. So the business partnering that we already talked about, but also storytelling. And storytelling it's not just in the words you use. It's almost so. A million years ago, before I got into finance and accounting, I was a journalist, and in a newspaper, you would have the editorial page where people are explicitly stating their opinions and views, but there's also choices in which stories you run that is the overall editorial view of the paper. So you decide, these are the stories we're going to run. We're going to bury this on page 7 below the fold, whatever. And then these are the key things. But you have that opportunity in FP&A where you're taking two disparate pieces of information, that relation. And if you can simply present them together, you're creating a narrative that you don't even have to explicitly state. It's there. If you see those two together and there's that clear correlation between them, and that's powerful. And I can see why you picked that one, because that's a big win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love the storytelling piece of finance. Sometimes I think like we dog on reports, like don't spend so much time putting together reports, but like a beautifully well done report that tells a story is such a powerful tool when you're working with a partner or a leader and trying to translate what's happening. Like there's so much value in that still.
Yeah, and it's so different than dashboards can be awesome, but they can also be so many data points that become like billboards that you just drive by on the interstate and you ignore them. So if you're opening up your ERP, you get the same dashboard every day. And especially if it's things you can't control, maybe it's a lagging indicator, or maybe it's, whatever it is, if it doesn't represent a lever, something that you can take action on, you start to just tune it out. And in some of these board reports or management reports that you put together that I've talked to people about, every month they're putting together an 80-page KPI report, and it's just who's reading that,
Yeah,
or
no one.
are and if they are, maybe they're just flipping to page 34 because there's the one metric they care about is buried there. But I think that the storytelling is great, and then there's also just the information overload. So to your point, I think it's finding those key items in that just sea of information and saying, let me pull these out and give you something of value. That's kind of the art of what we do, because you're not going to impact change. You could be reporting on every minute detail in the business, but if it's not creating a narrative or showing where we can take action, then what's the importance of reporting the data?
Yes. I love this stuff. It's so exciting to me. It's people to like boil it down and just give people what they need. If they want everything else, give it to them in the appendix, give it to them in a separate report, give them the important stuff right up front, and just that.
Exactly. Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. Well, what's top of mind for your career at the moment? What are you trying to learn or master anything new? Where's your focus these days?
I'm always trying to learn something new. I don't have anything particular I'm working on right now. I'm like been doing a lot of research on what kind of tools are out there for an FP&A because there's so many of them right now. And I'm just really excited about where the market's going with all the new things that are coming out.
Is there a person or thing that's had the greatest influence on your finance career?
Yeah. Gosh, I've been so lucky in my career to have just some really fantastic managers that were also mentors. And, that's not always the case for everyone. I had one early in my accounting career who was really just like a cheerleader for me, really wanted me to try everything, pushed me into doing my first presentations, that sort of thing. And most recently at Co-op Solutions, I had just a fantastic manager. I just learned so much from her about how to lead a team. And she really just involved me in a lot of decision making, letting me see like the ins and outs of things. And just someone who shares that much information from you, I just soaked it all in.
Yeah, that's great to have someone like that because so many times. So this is another remote challenge to me. And I found myself doing this, and I have to like step back and remind myself these are people because I guess and this you may appreciate this as a computer science person as well, but when you're working with people remotely, especially if you end up just talking to them in Teams or Slack or whatever communication you're using, where you're not even doing like Zoom or Teams, video conferencing, or when you don't have people, when people aren't turning on their cameras, I find when I'm talking to people that are remote and I haven't seen them, and especially if I'm just texting with them, that humanity like gets kind of washed away. And if I don't stop and say, wait, this is a person I need to actually re-engage and talk about Chris Christopherson or whatever before a meeting. Like the danger is that you just treat everybody like a computer program or like you're talking to them the same way you would chat GPT and you forget that there's a person on the other side. So when you have a manager, whether remote or in person, that's actually bringing you into the fold and not just telling you, hey, go do all this stuff because it's your job, whatever, and you don't know, where that report goes or what it's done for. That's how, as a manager, that's how you can build people. And as an employee, it's how you want to be treated and not just as a computer program, here, go do these tasks and give me your response. So that's great, and hopefully not exceedingly rare to have managers who will give you that sort of back and forth feedback loop of communication on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's so much like, it's just such a different world when you're working remotely. You have to really learn like how to balance that. Like what kind of questions do you ask over Teams versus email versus just calling someone? And
Yeah.
there's definitely an art form to that you really have to teach each other for sure.
All right. So we already talked about the budgeting side. Beyond challenges in budgeting, would you say the most challenging or worst FP&A experience in your career, biggest mistake you've made, what you learned from it? What's the saying? What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, or that what doesn't kill us will come back and try again.
Yeah.
I don't know, but what has been a challenge that you've had to overcome or a mistake or something like that in your career?
Oh, I remember the one that just had me shaking in my shoes. And it's, when I had first started a new job about 6 years ago, and I'd come from a smaller company, moving into more of a mid-sized to large company. And we got through budget season, my first budget season with the new company. And it was just like 2, 3 weeks after we had finished the budget. And we were still completely in Excel. And I find an error in an Excel model. And, it was a formula that hadn't gotten updated in some time, and it really needed to be. And so I do the math and I figure, I think we overstated revenue in the budget by about $1 million. And I thought, I'm going to lose my job for this. This is so bad. Coming from this tiny company where like $1 million, $1 million is a lot of money, right? But it's all relative. And so then it's like, oh gosh, what do you do? How many people would just be like, I'm going to forget that I saw that. I thought, nope, I got to fess up. I gotta go admit that I did this wrong. I messed up. So I take it to my manager, the same person that I've talked about who's been so great. And she looked at me and she was like, Lindsey, I make $1 million budget mistake every single year. It's no big deal. Just forget about it. It's like, what? Here, I think I'm probably going to get fired too. Don't worry about it. And she's right. The cool thing about FP&A and budgeting and forecasting is that nobody's ever right. We're always going to be wrong. It's just how wrong are you? You know? And so it's okay. It's okay if there's mistakes in there. You're not ever going to get everything right. And she's right. I've made a mistake every single year in budget since then. It all turned out okay.
If we were doing a video edit of this, I would love to drop in that picture of from Austin Powers where Dr. Evil goes, $1 million. I think it would be the perfect image, right? I had over $1 million mistake at a company that wasn't that small, but it was in the .com boom and VCs down our neck, and it was the same kind of thing. We had miscalculated a purchase order or classified it wrong, and at the end of the year, as we were about to report to all these angry investors, it was about $1.5 million, and this was early. It was my first sort of managerial role in FP&A, and I thought for sure I was about to lose my job, but we survived it. A couple long weekends, got beat up by some VCs, and we ultimately survived, and it was fine. But I don't know, those mistakes, they put things in perspective, and you learn from them, and they make you more cautious going forward. But we're not going to be perfect, and there's always stuff like that to miss. So. Mm-hmm. Now we've gotten to the kind of fun part of the show where we have two questions that we ask all of our guests, and I always love hearing these answers. The first is, what's something that not many people know about you, something that we can't find by Googling you online real quick?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I guess I'm passionate about, I read this book back in 2018 called Blue Zones, and it's about longevity, but that's not exactly the point. I read it though, and I felt so inspired. And I thought, I have to build a community for myself. And I think it's, especially in this field where, in the CFO org, we tend to be a lot of introverts, kind of like in our own little space. And it's just so important for people to get out there, build a community, make friends, find your people, especially when you're not like living close to family or you're estranged or whatever it might be. So that book really inspired me. And I did two things after I read it. First, I decided I'm going to go get my MBA. It was something I never thought I'd do, but the next year went and signed up, and I thought, why not? It's been 20 years since I've been, an undergrad, but let's go do this. Oh my gosh, what a good experience. I was actually like already managing a team, and I had all this experience. So I was taking the lessons I learned right back to work the next day, and using them right on the spot, which, you don't get to do that in undergrad for sure. So, and I met a lot of cool people, a lot of local people. And then the other thing I did was I thought, I got to find a lot more friends. I need to have people like in the town that I live in. All my friends are located all over the US, and I've got to have people who I want to, meet at the grocery store or just do life with. And so I started a book club, and it seems so simple, but we still meet. It's been 5 years. We get together at a brewery every single month and chit chat. And I've found this group of like-minded people that I can lean on. And, what it all comes down to is like getting over your fear. And so this is just something that I talk to my friends a lot about, is that there's a lot of things you can do in life that seem scary, like go on a podcast maybe. And if you just push through it, there's like safety precautions in place. It's not like anything's going to go that bad, but just getting over that hump. And so we really like to all push each other now to do those things. I think that's important.
That's great. And I think the timing of you reading that book right before COVID was probably pretty significant, because the Blue Zones, I guess it talks about longevity, friendships, and they go into maybe diet and genetics and stuff too, but they talk about the social part of it. And there's also the Harvard happiness study that's been running since like the 30s, and it shows that how important relationships are. And I think, especially in post-COVID world, and now with everybody working remote, it's harder to have those. And that's to to your point, one of my favorite things about these podcasts is it forces me to talk to and meet new people and not stay in my pod and stay engaged. And but it's great that the continuous learning going back. So you've got your brain plasticity there, right? From going back to school and learning from it, and then having the social groups and everything. So you've probably added 15, 20 years to your life just by
I hope
following
so.
those steps. That's great. Yeah. No, that's great. Okay. So here's the big question. What is your favorite Excel function and why?
Well, gosh, there's a lot of them, right? I think the most common one is probably sum if or sum ifs. I like that one a lot. I use it all the time. But the formula that I'm always surprised that more people don't use is actually EO month. And all it does is tells you the last day of the month as related to another cell. And I use that every single day. Every time I bring up a new spreadsheet and put months across the top, that's what I use. I like how it standardizes the date and it's easy and quick. And that's my go-to.
Yep, that's great. All the days, for some reason, it's easy to, especially for someone like me who's not in Excel as much as I used to be. All the days functions in Excel I forget about, but the EOM and all that are so nice to have. Especially if you're doing cash flow forecasts or whatever you're doing, anything on a routine basis like that. Being able to alter the day is key. So that's a great one. Yeah, glad you brought that one. All right. Well, this has been great. If our listeners want to connect with you, follow you, what's the best way for people to follow you and stay in touch?
Yeah, please look me up. I'm on LinkedIn and I'd love to connect with people.
Lindsey, well, I really appreciate your time and thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.